Hi, everybody. This is Kate Haley with Glazer's Camera here in Seattle, Washington, wishing you a happy Saturday afternoon. Today, we're bringing you a new live stream session with Sigma, and the topic is concert photography. The title is called Rocking Gently into Concert Photography. We have a presentation that we will be having from Marc Farb, who works with Sigma. Before we get to that, though, just a quick reminder. Glazers is now open as we shift into fall, Monday through Sunday. So every day of the week, Monday through Saturday, our hours are 9 to 6, and on Sundays it's 12 to 5. So come in, visit us, come in and browse, pick up that new camera or lens or camera bag or tripod that you've been looking for. Our rentals department is also open, I believe those same hours, but check it out on our website for details. So before we get into the presentation, I'd love for Marc, if you could tell us a little bit about what you do with Sigma, and then we'll talk about how you guys can ask questions during the session. So Marc, tell us a little bit about you and your role at Sigma.
Sure. Marc Farb, been with Sigma for about a little more than 8 years now, and my title there is Tech Rep. So, under the heading of Tech Rep, I get to do a lot of trade show work. I do counter demos. I do a lot of teaching, but I come to Sigma with a very healthy background in photography. I've been in the industry for more than 20 years. I've been a commercial photographer more than 22 years. And actually, I've been shooting since I'm 13 years old, or actually even a little younger than that. So I've got more than 45 years of shooting experience, starting with film. So there is really nothing that I've not ever photographed before. I mean, everything. I mean, runway fashion, concert photography, project work, event work, portraits, landscapes, night photography, forensic work. I've done it all, and some of it fun, some of it not so fun. But I come with a lot of experience, and like everybody else, you make a lot of mistakes to learn, and that's the best way to learn. And also um, consult with each other. So we learn from each other, and that's
Yep.
another reason why I love working with the group of tech reps that I work with. There are 7 of us in the group, and every day is a learning experience when we get together. So actually, I love seeing my photo family, and it's great when we're able to get out on the road. So hopefully, sometime in the very near future, we can all get out and get together and see each other and say hello and shake hands at one of the shows or at the store itself.
Yeah, we definitely miss having you guys here doing these kinds of sessions in person. Aaron and I, who's hanging out with us in the background, have done a lot of events together over the past 2 or so years, where we go out and explore using Sigma lenses and that kind of thing, and it's always a lot of fun. So hi to those of you guys who are tuning in so far. Thank you for joining us. Just a reminder, if you have questions during this session, please post those in the comments on Facebook or in the chat on YouTube, and we'll do some Q&A throughout and probably wrap the session with a little bit more Q&A. Don't be shy. This is actually the first time we've done this topic since I've been running the events for the store, so I'm excited. I will mention I have a little background in working in this genre with film back in Atlanta on a million years ago, what feels like, but it wasn't that long ago. But I've also photographed bands in some clubs here in the Seattle area off and on since 2007, which is kind of crazy that I've been here since 2007. So anyhow, I'm looking forward to hearing your tips and tricks on photographing this genre. And again, you guys tuning in, please ask your questions. We'd love to hear from you. So with that said, Marc, we'll kick this over to you so that we can start with your presentation.
Excellent. All right, so let me start off with a couple of real simple things first. Um, if you're at the point where you're thinking about new camera bodies, um, and you're shooting crop sensor, or you're thinking of going from full frame backwards to a crop sensor, it's not going backwards at all. You can shoot anything that you want to shoot, crop sensor or full frame. That really makes no never mind whatsoever. You've got the right tools for you, regardless of what you're doing. Pixels are not always, made or pixel count is sometimes made more of a big deal than it should be. Less pixels sometimes is actually a better thing for you, and you know to make an 8 by 10 photograph, to give you an idea, again, like I said, commercial photographer, to me, everything end game is print. So I want to see everything in print at some point, and I like printing big. I mean, to me, big is larger than 8 by 10. We're talking 16 by 20, 40 by 60, and even larger. To date, my biggest print that I've done is actually 4 foot by 32.5 feet. That took 168 frames to put together. And when we put it together, I could have still even gone larger at 1:1 with that. But that said, clean information is the most important part of the game. So if you're shooting concert work, especially or low light work, higher megapixels, higher ISOs are probably where you're going to spend a lot of your time. Just remember, if you're stepping up your game and going from crop sensor to full frame, glass gets more expensive because you need more coverage on that sensor. One of the neat things about the newer mirrorless cameras, and Canon finally just joined this game in this respect. Sony and Nikon have always given you the option with their full frame cameras to put a crop sensor lens on there and go into an auto crop so you can utilize some special glass. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that in my presentation, you're going to see a mix of crop sensor lenses, crop cameras, and full frame cameras because I have everything. I shoot 4 different systems side by side. It doesn't make a difference to me. Basically, there are 6 functions on every camera that I use, and that's all I care about. I do shoot in a raw format because I do process everything because, again, back to my days of film where I would do all my developing in the darkroom. So processing a raw file is no more than doing a digital darkroom, if you will. And I want clean information. I want sharp, good images. And when you're shooting concert work, sometimes that's not always doable. Um, so you like I say, you'll see a mix of cameras, mix of lenses. There's a lot of really cool things in there. And if you have questions on them, please ask. Um, there are a couple of other tools that I use that I'll get into and show you as well. If you're starting out and you don't know where to begin with concert photography, my suggestion or first suggestion is find some local clubs. Generally, they will not give you a hard time by bringing a camera in, and you kind of have free reign to do what you want. On a professional show, you're going to get at best 3 songs at the beginning of the show, and then you're going to get booted out. In some venues, you'll be allowed to mill around and shoot from other places in the venue. One of my favorites would be actually the soundboard. So I'll back off to the soundboard, have a longer lens, and no tripods, no monopods. Everything is handheld. So if you've got a big lens, you do a good workout, make sure that you're strong enough to hand hold that and hold it for a long time. Um, and be able to get your practice in on shooting from different places. Um, Other than that, let me jump in. I'm going to share my screen and get started here. Share. All right. So, oh, lost my mouse for a second there. Here we go. All right. Um, Generally, when you walk into these smaller clubs, this is kind of the lighting that you're going to see. And well, it's pretty abysmal. I've shot in clubs that had amazing lighting and sound stages, and I've shot in clubs where they've got 40-watt bulbs hanging over the stage. But my recommendation is when you get in there, you're going to take your first frame as a reference and get in there. Now, if you look up in the top left corner of your screen, you're going to see what you're going to see on the back of your camera, lighting wise. Um, I thought I actually had a picture in this frame and I didn't, and I'll pull one out and show it to you a little bit later if we have time. But something that you want to get your hands on is something called a color checker passport. This is going to be your best friend because you walk into the club, get them to turn on some lighting in the club, and even if they turn on all of the colors and all the lights on the stage, get a reference frame and then forget about it. What you're going to do is when you go back to do your editing, regardless of what platform you're using, whether it's Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever you want to work in is fine. But that color checker is something that they call spectrally neutral. It doesn't care about your light source, and it will give you an even baseline for colors. Now, technically, when I normally do a color check at the beginning of any job or any shoot, especially in challenging lighting, I'd like having a person in there because I like to see skin tones. Because once you're able to neutralize everything and see a skin tone, you can bring everything back into normal and make quick tweaks on the fly during your edits if you need to. But basically, you can see that they like red as the main color on the stage, and most of the time they do. Most guys that are working the sound booth are your lighting guys, and they typically have no idea what they're doing. Very rarely do you get lucky with someone who has a theatrical background and really knows actually how to work a light stage. So getting clean light is sometimes a really, really big challenge. So being able to neutralize everything and bring it back here, um, that's going to work really well for you. And if you also notice in some of the extra information that I have on the images, in a lot of cases, I am shooting wide open and trying to get ISOs as low as I possibly can. In some cases, it works. In some cases, it doesn't. But you'll see that as I go along. So talking about crappy light stages. So here there are tons of gaps and shadows on the stage. So it's not like I can actually run over there and say, "Hey, I need you to do this," or let's move some spotlights around, or tell him how to do his job because he's not going to listen anyway, or she. Take advantage of it. So here, the bass player, as he was getting into his groove and doing his thing, he kept rocking in and out of the shadows. So I took that to my advantage and I waited for him to actually be in the right place at the right time and time my shot a little bit during the song, and was able to get actually a really nice shot of the bass player. And again, as you're shooting, especially if you're shooting for web use, try and do more horizontals. Verticals tend to be a problem when you go to post to certain pages like Instagram. So try and mix it up with horizontals and verticals and experiment with different things. Just make sure that you're getting the details that you want. I wanted to show the emotion. I wanted to show a little bit about the bass player, and just in the mood doing what he does. So again, working with the different lighting. So as they were playing, the red lights in this particular case kind of splashed across his face and gave an interesting look to him as he was playing. So it worked okay. And again, ISOs are creeping up there if you take a look. And you'll see that the lens that I'm actually using here is a crop sensor lens. One other thing that I started to mention and I actually didn't get into is, for me, I also treat concert work similar to I do with fast action in sports, where frame rate is actually an important thing to me. I don't necessarily want to hold my finger down on a button and machine gun at 14 frames a second, but having a camera that's capable of between 10 and 14 frames a second will allow you to capture certain nuances in emotions and actions that they will do over and over again, or certain moments that you need to be there and you need to be able to get that moment just because it's an interaction with a fan, or something in the song or an emotion that they show while they're playing. So you want to be able to pop off a handful of frames and have at least two or three to choose from. So this way you can choose the best image. Uh, Here we've got a band that actually crazy metal bands, and this was part of their thing. But I decided to take this a whole different tack. Even though I was getting some really nice clean images, I actually went back to black and white and added noise to it because I thought the chaos of the noise added to the genre of the music that was being played, and it kind of enhanced the images itself. So by the way, another secret and trick and tip is that most of the time when you see black and white images with concert photography, unless you're back in 1970, um, which, unless if you figured out how to do time travel, please let me know. Um, is the reason you go with black and white is because you have a little bit more control over your noise levels, and you're able to eliminate some of that noise and some of the distractions and flaring and things that you're going to get from shooting extremely high ISOs. Um, Try wide, try telephoto. Generally, when I'm shooting at the edge of the stage, personally, I like to keep two cameras with me. And you don't have a choice of, being able to run back, change lenses, and do different things. Like I said, I like to shoot with two cameras. I keep one on the wide side and one on the longer side. So depending on where I'm moving to or where I'm sliding off to what corner of the stage, I may have a longer lens on one, whether it be a prime or a zoom. That doesn't make a bit of difference. You have to kind of figure that out and do your homework before you get into the venue that you're going to. If you're not sure, and you're going to shoot in a venue for the first time and you were not able to do any homework on the venue, go prepared with a zoom. go with one wide zoom and one long zoom. So this way you have a choice. You can get into some details and you can pull back, get the whole band, get two or three guys together when they're jamming, when they're singing. Um, it all works. So this way you can have a little bit of choice. One of the lenses that I will tell you that tends to get overplayed a lot in concert photography is the rectangular fisheye. Because you can get the entire stage and it achieves infinity focus pretty fast and you really don't even have to think about it. Just be careful because going too wide and bending your perspective kind of hurts because it kind of it degrades your work a little bit. One of the things that I do like about the 14 and the 1428 is because of the amount of correction that is in lens. There's excuse me, no distortion, no bending of perspective, so I can actually get straight lines, whether it's on architecture or on the amps, or even if they get close to me, it doesn't warp it, make it look like a funhouse mirror image. So I'm able to kind of really pull you into the scene with using that ultra wide. So like I'm probably about 10 inches away from the stage here. And I loved when he stepped into me and it kind of like drew him in. So I've got his leg kind of like a leading line almost into what's going on the stage. Here's one of those wide angle shots. I actually intentionally did this. This was part of the Summerland tour that I got hired to photograph in Las Vegas a couple years back. And I set a separate camera down on the stage in between these two monitor amps. And I wanted the perspective because I know the lead singer, I know how he acts and he performs. So there are certain things that I wanted the entire band, I wanted that 180-degree perspective on. And I wanted to be able to kind of tell an entire story with one image. One of the things that I love doing, and as you get friendly with the band or the venue, and or if you're being hired to shoot the band on a tour or something like that, you'll get different access to different points of the stage, and they're usually taped off or they're marked. Uh, in smaller clubs, they're not taped off. The stages are really, really tiny and they're pretty well jammed with musicians and instruments. So there's not a lot of room to move. You've got to be really careful not to interrupt while they're playing and not be part of the show. You kind of need to sneak around and get around them. Um, if you notice that I'm shooting wide open here, I am shooting extremely wide because I wanted him in the kit, and I'm dragging my shutter a little bit because I wanted him to be sharp, but I wanted motion on the sticks. Most of the time, I don't like freezing the sticks. I want to show the action and the fact that these guys are going like the hammers of hell, and they'll actually play into you. They'll have fun with you. And in this particular band, this was a little club up in Vermont, and their thing was actually more about the audience. They wanted me to actually do more of framing the band out from behind them and shoot the audience through them and around them, getting to show the whole crowd because this was a Grateful Dead cover band. So it was actually kind of neat to see how they interacted. And before the first set ended, this club was at max capacity and there had to be 250 people dancing in the audience, and the stage and the floor and the bar was actually bouncing. I thought we were all going to end up in the basement of the place, but that's how much weight and how much activity was going on. So it was kind of neat to pull all that together. Um, One of the times that I do like the rectangular fisheye is to actually turn around the crowd. So this was part of that Summerland tour, and got to turn around and show off about 50,000 of my closest friends while I'm shooting the show. And of course, I got yelled at for standing up on the stanchion, which you're not supposed to do. But security gave me about 10 seconds, and they're like, "All right, get down." But be mindful of security, be mindful of the crowd. They will paw and claw at you and they want to be where you're at. Watch your gear. I will tell you that because if it's in arm's reach, people are not always honest and friendly. They will take what they can when they can. So make sure that your gear is secure or you're holding on to it or it's on your person. So keep that in mind. And again, just be cautious and safe. Safety is an important piece of it as well. Um, Details. Sometimes the action isn't on the stage, it's behind the stage, around the stage. The fans, the roadies, the band's family or friends. So you've got to have the wives of the band, of course, they're rocking out. You get one of the patrons who gets into that moment and he's singing along with the band. So don't be afraid to turn around and photograph some of the crowd. Um, on the top right, you'll see young lady. That's actually from that club in Vermont, and she was just moving and grooving and enjoying herself and dancing like nobody was watching and having a grand old time. And I used two of the band members to frame out the shot, which was kind of neat. Um, again, tiny little stage. They squeezed 9 guys up on this stage, which I could not believe, and they were not in each other's way, which is even more impressive. The roadies were actually celebrating a birthday. Um, so they were enjoying themselves, and they were asking for some shots of themselves, and they kind of flagging me down while I'm getting ready, getting set up to shoot, and getting ready to cover the gig. um, Here's one of the really fun shots that I like to use for, or when I have that fisheye. Um, that particular lens, you achieve focus about 3 inches in front of the front element. So while I don't play any side on politics, Victor is actually a very interesting person. I like the tattoo, I like the rings, and the fact that he's a character, and I was able to do, he threw the horns up for me, and he was having a great night, enjoying himself. And the band was even taking part in what was going on as they're getting ready to start the next set. They're watching and talking about it, up on the stage, which was kind of neat. But there is also a byproduct, and I think it's actually the next slide. While Victor threw up the horns and um, was doing this for me, yes, this young man who was about 6 years old was sitting on mom's shoulders and was trying to figure out how to throw the horns. And I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but well, after about a 2 or 3 minute thing trying to figure out how to do the horns, that's the single gun salute that he gave me. And I kind of saw this happening over my shoulder, so I spun around and I was shooting it with a longer lens. And it was actually kind of entertaining because Dad was standing next to Mom, and they got a very big kick out of the fact that, well, he flipped me off. So of course I told him that had to be their next Christmas card. Um, when you're shooting, and again, musicians like to play into you. They will actually react to you. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Um, so just to show you how close we get to musicians when we're playing, um, this is actually the shooter over there is a good friend of mine. His name is Glenn, and he's shooting actually the 18 to 35 on a 7D Mark, the original 7D, as a matter of fact. And he's in absolute rock and roll heaven right now because that particular guitarist is one of his idols. And he saw him, came over, knelt down, and he started playing right to the camera. So the set of images that he got from that was just absolutely mind bending. And I'm glad I was able to capture this and show exactly where we are in relation to what's going on. And this happens in the clubs as well. So again, as I got kind of pushed away from the stage, you can see that musicians will get in the face of their audience and they like to get close, but sometimes they don't realize that when you're shooting them, they like to get too close. And let me throw another thought out there while I'm talking about getting close. Be mindful of the band. Some band members, some musicians get very camera shy, believe it or not. Sometimes they could be having a bad night and they don't want to be photographed. So you'll get those instructions from one of the band members or a manager or a stagehand, or somebody will give you the heads up. Just don't do that. There's a drummer that I work with periodically that I've known for 40 years, actually more than that. And he does not like having a camera stuck in his face. So I've got to shoot him from different angles far away so he does not see the camera. And otherwise, it distracts him and he gets freaked out, and it doesn't work very well. So here's one of those cases. Really, really poor lighting, but he got just a little too close, and I had to kind of keep backing up because every time I backed up, he would back into me. But again, we had some fun, and he was playing to me and wanted some shots of himself. Here's one of those cases that I was telling you that lighting in the club will actually truly suck. Those round hi hat lights was the stage lighting in this particular venue. Those were like 40-watt LED lights that um, barely threw anything out on the stage. And you can see by the ISO, I'm pushing some serious limits here. And, I could only open up to F2. So, again, this is what you're dealing with. And I left this one as a color image because I wanted you to see the noise. Um, Now, the funny thing is that sometimes with the crop sensor cameras and some of the newer bodies, even with an ISO that high, the images actually look pretty good and they're not noisy. Everything is predicated on how deep your shadows are, colors, and light. So sometimes you can get away with a higher range and in color it'll look great. Sometimes go black and white, do your noise reduction, and have it be done with it. Um, Again, being able to get the action going on, I was actually trying to position myself because he's actually balancing on that stanchion that I got yelled at. And I actually, the reason I left this image the way I did is that the guy standing in the bottom right corner is security, and he's praying to God that he doesn't take a header one way or the other into the crowd or back behind him on concrete. So he's doing a balancing act, and he kept reaching over to his fans. So again, safety is an important thing, and sometimes musicians are as bad, if not worse, than photographers. They don't think about that; they're in the moment, and it's go for broke. I've actually watched musicians scale the scaffolding that holds all the amplifiers and fall, and then try to get up and keep playing like it was no big deal. Case in point, way back in the day, during a Monsters of Rock tour, Sammy Hagar. Actually, I watched him scale like a 60-foot thing of amplifiers in Giant Stadium, and I watched him take a tumble onto one of the lower scaffoldings and then which broke his fall, to find out later on that he broke his tailbone on that one. So again, safety, please. Again, shooting from somewhere else in the club. The drummer here is a friend, and he knew that I was watching him, so I did the selective focus thing on the end of his drumstick. And once he knew I was watching him, he had some fun with me. And again, I didn't like shooting at the edge of the stage. I wanted to get a little further back. I wanted to kind of shoot in between the band, and I was concentrating on him. So I made my way back into the club and found a table that I actually stood on. And of course, the owner came over to me and said, "Please be careful. I don't want to take anyone to the hospital, and I don't want to fill out any accident papers." So again, shooting from on top of a table to get a good vantage point of the drummer. Vantage point at the edge of the stage. Like I said, they will play to you. Um, Getting the whole stage, getting a reference of what's going on, singling out, or if you're able to isolate the musicians at any different point, go for it. But try to also get some of the musicians playing together, because sometimes that's more interesting. Um, Again, in this case, I wanted a couple of images of each of the band members separately, and then of course as they played and they came together, or as a whole band, you get the whole reference shot. When you're able to get in super tight, one of the things that I'll definitely make reference to is keep tabs on the microphone, because nobody wants to see a microphone jammed into somebody's face or mouth. Um, Watch your angle shooting up from the corner of the stage or the bottom of the stage. You don't want to look up their nose. Uh, it's not very complimentary, not very pleasing. But again, here you want to try and make it look a little bit different. So I was able to get a good tight shot. And again, watch for the mouth, watch for the expressions, because again, you don't want their mouths closed. You don't want to just see teeth, but you want reaction. You want to see that something's going on. As I mentioned before, details. Sometimes you'll see different things, like um, top left corner. Actually, I say start top right corner. The band, um, not the band, the club itself. That's their logo behind the guitar, and I love the contrast between the blue, the white, and the red, which kind of goes a little wonky on you, especially when it's a neon sign. So it's on some kind of cool branding, but it also adds to the branding of the guitar or the bass that you could be photographing. So sometimes you might get lucky and be able to get some images off to somebody, and show off something to a manufacturer, or if you have a custom guitar builder or a bass builder, it's neat. Or the electronics. When you're looking down at the corners of the stage or the bottom of the stage, looking at some of the electronics that these guys bring out is kind of cool, and the boards that they set up. So doing a little bit of a selective focus thing, which also is kind of neat. And then if you do a little bit of homework on some of these electronics, you'll find that actually professional musicians, very famous professional musicians, are actually behind the scenes. This is what they do, is their everyday business. So you've got guys that actually create these effects and sounds and different pieces of electronics, which is kind of neat. Um, the watch for somebody doing a little bit of video or doing the selfies. Here I've actually got one of the fathers of the band actually doing a video with his cell phone, and the guys in the band are seniors in high school, and these guys rock like they've been out on tour for years. Well-oiled band, well-oiled machine, great sound, and I mean they just rocked the club on this particular night. In this, it was a battle of the bands, and it was kind of neat to kind of do the whole um, semi-portrait thing or behind the scene thing with getting that there, which is again kind of a neat photograph. um, the bass player David Shaw, again a little self-promotion there, but again just something a little creative to show the frets, to show the hand, the neck of the bass. If you have the opportunity when you're working with certain bands, creating something unique and special for them, like this particular band was a Jimi Hendrix Experience cover band, and they were looking to put together a CD or a DVD, and they needed some artwork for the cover of their first demo album. So, am I dating myself by saying album? Um, I guess vinyl is making a comeback, believe it or not. Anyway, so I thought about the genre of music. I thought about who was singing, what was going on, and I actually kind of took a little bit of an artistic cue from Electric Ladyland. So if any of you are Hendrix fans, um, something neat to take a look at and incorporate as you're shooting or as you're editing. So I created this image, and there's a few filters and a little bit of editing in there, and this ended up becoming their cover for their first demo that they put together. When the band gets done playing, or as they're getting set up, look for interesting things. This was actually at a fall carnival kind of a thing, so um, I just happened to see the guitar leaning against the old style tube amp with the hat, and it looked like an album cover just sitting there, in the light, the way the light was kind of splashing it from the side in the gazebo. And I love the reflections, which I also tend to try and incorporate when, where, and how I can into things, is I do love reflections. So I was able to kind of get a little bit of everything in this together and create just an interesting image. uh, Hair, it's all about the hair, young, old, in between, even if they don't have any hair anymore. Um, you know, again, doesn't make a difference what the genre of music is, but again, when you get the hair going, it's kind of a neat thing. And uh, I'm even more impressed that he's even able to play without being able to see the strings or the guitar. And good portion of the time, his hair was in his face just like that, but he never skipped a beat. As Even as you get older and you start losing the hair, uh, but it still kind of looks kind of interesting, a little unworldly. But again, these guys just rocked it out, and as he was jamming and doing his thing, a little bit of the hair action. Going black and white or color is an interesting question that I get a lot of times. And like I mentioned before about doing the black and white, it sometimes is about, in the edit, if you want a clean image, you do it because of noise, and the colors, the lighting on the stage is really horrific. So you kind of want to even it out and not make it distracting. But think about the genre of music. Think about, does it add any emotion? Does it add any feeling to what you've got going on? And Arthur is actually an amazing guitarist, and when he starts playing and he starts getting into his groove, um, it just he's working up a sweat, and the emotion and the energy and the feel, as he was actually doing a Muddy Waters cover at this particular time. And it's kind of funny because when you look back at a lot of the things that you shoot, you remember everything about the moment that you photographed it. You'll remember the song, you remember the tempo, you remember the crowd. You'll start kind of almost reliving it at a point, if you're anything like me and with your photography. A lot of good memories, a lot of good times, a lot of good fun, and this is something that I really hope that we get back to doing again very soon. Um, Again, you see the posturing, you'll see um, the the body language, again, watching where the microphone is, but again, you can see that he's belting out part of a melody. And this is a Led Zeppelin cover band. So believe it or not, the gentleman with the long scraggly hair and pretending he's Robert Plant is actually a high school English teacher, full time. This is what he does for fun. So it's kind of neat when you're able to get out into the circuit and you hit the road and watch these guys cover different venues. Some of the tribute bands actually do a local circuit. This is how you get to make friends with them. This is how you get to kind of get backstage, side stage, or wherever you want to work inside the club, because they'll vouch for you, or they'll tell the club owner, hey, they're with us. We want him to shoot, give him carte blanche, whatever. So this way you don't get to tap on the shoulder and say, okay, time to put the camera away, time to move on. But again, Led Zeppelin cover band. And here again, I went black and white with it, because as he was singing and as they were playing, it was just this was a song remains the same moment, where you could see the posturing, you could actually picture Robert Plant standing right there, John Paul Jones just banging away on the bass. And again, it just, for me, I went black and white with this one, because it said more than the color image. Again, old school, wanted black and white on this one, because again, lighting was kind of harsh. So again, it didn't detract. I was able to get rid of some distractions by going the black and white route. And this is, by the way, that drummer that I mentioned that he doesn't like being photographed. And the best part about it is I have a picture of him at 17 years old in the same exact pose. Timing is everything. Drummers are the most fun people to photograph, because you never know what to expect from them, especially when they know that you're photographing them. They will play to you. They will have fun with you. And they don't skip a beat. They don't miss what they're doing. They keep on going, but they're definitely hamming it up for the camera for you. So watch for these things. Look out for what you can get. Again, once he knew I was back behind the kit and I was photographing him and I was concentrated on him, he got a little bit more animated as he sang and played. So again, playing that game. This time I went a little bit wider, so I was, with a wide zoom, I should say. I wanted to kind of come in a little tighter, so just to give a sense of how tight the space itself was. But again, dragging the shutter because I want the motion on the sticks. And back to what I said before about reflections. So shooting from the front of the stage using a 70 to 200. Now, if you notice towards the right side of the frame, there's that kind of a vignette. That's actually the leg of one of the guitarists stepping back and forth in front of me. So I actually had to time the shot in order to get what I wanted with the drummer, the name of the band, and a little bit of the branding of where they were playing. So again, you got to kind of pull it all together. And sometimes you don't have a whole lot of time to do this, so you've got to think quickly. And this is another reason to be able to shoot more in the smaller clubs, because you could practice and think about scenarios that you're going to run into in other places and kind of practice. So if you make a mistake, it's in a local club. You get to go back and do it again and again and again, and it's no big deal. Again, I always have a fascination with drummers because, excuse me, they are in the back corner of the stage. They are one of the hardest musicians to photograph because they're usually in a shadow. I got lucky. They threw a spot on this particular drummer. And if you notice, I'm actually using the least likely lens that you would ever think about shooting a concert with, because just happened to be out that evening and I wasn't expecting to, and I was having some fun with the 18 to 300. It's a sharp, fast little lens, and I love what this thing can actually do. So again, in really challenging conditions, a nighttime concert on an outdoor stage, bam, there's the drummer in the back corner of the stage. Doesn't get any better than that. And again, being able to back off and do something with a different lens that I did have in the bag. So a little bit more of everything that goes on. This was actually more of a formal show that I photographed for them. And these, again, U2 cover band, and these guys are amazing. If you ever have a chance to get out to Vegas and see them, They play the stages on Fremont quite a bit. They do tour around. These guys are amazing. The guy that's singing, you would swear it was Bono. Uh, Dead ringer appearance wise and voice wise. Uh, Again, looking for different things and trying something different. I got lucky here with the white light. So the guy at the sound booth actually woke up and said, "Oh, let me throw a white light on this guy because he's beginning a really cool jam." And I got the branding for the club. I got him playing, and uh, it's everything kind of came together for a change. Watching the musicians do what they do. And again, this is one of the trademarks of this particular band, singing with the megaphone. So again, something back from the 90s. And again, love, love, love the reflection in the glasses because I've got the front of the stage, I've got part of Fremont Street there, I've got the canopy, the band name, and everything. It's all going on. And actually, when you look at this image as a print, you get to see all of it in one shot. You look in the reflection on the glasses, and you've got the drummer doing his thing. And again, this is one of those times where, you know what, I did go a little bit faster because I wasn't going to get a second chance at that. But in order for me to get what I wanted, I bumped my shutter speeds a little bit to get as close as I could, and I got a little bit of movement on the hands. But I would have loved to see a little bit more movement because this was as they were ending their set and wasn't going to get another chance at it. So now it's time for questions, comments, sarcastic remarks.
Well, we haven't had any sarcastic remarks come in, but we do have a couple of questions. So you were talking about you shoot with 4 different systems, which sounds a little crazy to me, but okay. Um, but do you have a preference, or maybe could you talk a little bit about the advantages of full frame versus mirrorless, or not necessarily mirrorless, but the crop sensors? So maybe talk
Actually,
about,
there's 2 good questions in there: the mirrorless versus traditional mirror box cameras.
yeah,
I know, there's the rage right now is everybody wants to go mirrorless. But the first and foremost thing that you've got to understand about a mirrorless camera is that the focus system is radically, radically different than a traditional mirror box camera. You've got 2 types of focus. You've got phase difference and phase contrast. Phase difference is when you slide glass back and forth to achieve focus. Phase contrast is your sensor-based focus, which is where all of the mirrorless cameras start. Some of them are incorporating other algorithms and other things, so you can get kind of almost a hybrid of sliding the glass as well as achieving focus from the sensor. So your focus systems in the early days, they were very slow on the mirrorless. They've increased speed wise
yeah.
and it's almost seamless, but there are times that there will be a little bit of a hiccup or hang up, or if you hyperfocus and have to reacquire focus, that could be a bit of a challenge sometimes. So you've got to find that hard contrast and be able to nail it back on there. And as far as crop sensor versus full frame, um, when you're shooting, like if you're doing a night sky, that's actually where a full frame camera is going to be your best friend because the pixels are going to be bigger and deeper, and your noise is definitely going to be very different because of the format of that. But when you start creeping up there in 60, 75, 100 megapixels, now you're getting crazy. To be quite honest, the perfect happy medium is, I would say, 24 to 30 megapixels is more than adequate than anybody ever needs. In a past lifetime, I worked for another manufacturer that their cameras were 5 and 6 megapixels for the longest time, and I produced 4 foot by 8 foot prints easily because there's enough information there. Um, but it's, just is a matter of um, the 2 lenses that I absolutely adore the most, to be quite honest, in the crop sensor world are the 18 to 35 and the 50 to 100 because they're both constant f1.8 lenses and they are the perfect event pair of lenses. So much so that we actually have a pair of those in the cine world. And if you're shooting Super 35, those are your first go-to lenses as cine lenses because they're zooms. They're giving you everything that you need is focal length, whether you're doing, the head and shoulders, talking head interview kind of thing, grip and grin, or you've got to back off and do something a little bit longer. Um, that's a great place to be. So if you're on a limited budget and you need to be somewhere, um, they're vast lenses that give you a lot to work with. And so like a D500 7D Mark II, a D6300, 6500, um, these cameras have frame rate for me, and um, I can go to town on whatever I need to do because I've got the frame rate, I've got a fast aperture, and like the 50 to 100 is my 70 to 200 only a stop faster. So if I've got really challenging conditions, I can shoot at f1.8 or f2 and still get exactly what I need. Um, so that's where the crop sensor works for me. There are guys that I know that they've built their entire businesses on crop sensor cameras dating back to the D300S, and there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Sometimes people have camera envy, and they like, oh, you've got to have a 5 DSR, or you've got to have a D6, and you're not a professional unless you've got a full frame camera. That's nonsense. Being professional is very different, and producing professional results is very different than being about your equipment. I've watched guys take $99 point and shoot cameras and create $1 million campaigns with them. It's not about the camera; it's about the person behind it. To be quite honest, um, some people have it in their head that they have to go full frame, and you're not professional unless you go full frame, which is nonsense. Um, the gear is the most important part of you as a creator. So it's like buying a pair of pants or a shirt. You gotta fit what you're getting into, and it's gotta look good on you. It's gotta work with you. Um, your lenses, as long as they do what you need it to do, you know, no pun intended, but rock on. That's where it's at. Um, it's you create with what you've got, and the guys and girls that can create and go beyond what the capabilities of their equipment are sometimes are even more impressive. So be creative, uh, you know, and keep shooting.
Well, I know for me, I shifted to mirrorless cameras a few years ago when at the time there weren't there weren't full frame mirrorless cameras. So I shoot on a crop sensor system, and I don't feel limited by it. There's occasions when I use medium format because the shoot that I'm doing warrants it. But like you said, it's about the person behind the camera. So use the tools that you have available to you, and when you feel like you've reached a limit, then upgrade or update and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So a couple of other questions. So someone was asking early about like pricing or marketing for getting work as a concert photographer. Now, in my experience, there's not a ton of money to be made to shooting shows,
nope.
but maybe could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Shooting concert work is definitely a labor of love. It's more about the creativity of what you can do and what you get out of it. Sometimes you get lucky and the band actually has a budget for you to create some images for them for their marketing. Not likely, not often. Um, Usually they come to you and say, "Hey man, we'll let you into the show for free, or we'll
Yeah.
buy a couple of beers,"
Yep.
which is I'm okay with that too because it's photography, music, and a beer. It's a party. Um, but sometimes if you have some local magazines or a local paper that you can actually create a body of work and go in and the entertainment section. Um, One of my buddies used to shoot for Seven Magazine out in Las Vegas, and he would get a list of shows that were coming up for like a 3 week or 4 week run, and whether it be on Fremont or the Brooklyn Bowl or the Smith Center or wherever it was, he would get to pick and choose what venues. Um, Kate, as you know, there's a lot of you got to make your bones first, and there's a lot of shows that you don't want to shoot, and
Yeah.
there's a bunch of doing it free before someone actually says, "Hey, there's a paycheck involved," and even when there's a check involved, it's generally not a lot.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I
every
think
once in a great while, it gets lucky.
yeah, well, and I think you bring up a good point of like finding news outlets or magazines or places that you could potentially work with to capture shows on the local scene, because the bands might not have the budget, but maybe a magazine would or a newspaper would. So there's
Yeah,
different kinds of ways you could try and get creative with trying to make some income from that. Another
yeah.
question would be on model releases. Are you, now, I've never, I'll say that I've never, in the bands that I've worked with, never worried about a model release. But I know that when we think about a model release, we're thinking about really needing that if we're going to sell the image in some way
Yes.
for profit. So,
Oh,
you
yeah.
go ahead. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, yeah. So again, an unsigned, unnamed band, it's kind of carte blanche. Out of respect for the band and the members, having a form of a model release is always a good thing, or a property release for the club. And by the way, work with the club. Sometimes they don't have a house photographer, or sometimes their house photographer is unreliable or can't make it for certain things. So you might be able to get an in there and work with a local club. That's in a whole nother story. But um, when you're working a professional show for like even Seven Magazine, there are bands that you have to sign an NDA, or you have to sign, or you're signing the model release that they give you because they don't want you to turn around and sell the images.
Right.
Um, you're limited by their manager and what their production is. So more on the professional side is where it becomes a big issue. Locally and unsigned bands, it's really not a big issue. If anything, it's to their benefit because you're using it on social media and people are getting to recognize who they are. So that's the one way that they can actually be found. But I've seen where um, the photographer was told you have absolutely no rights to any of the images for a show, and they actually canvassed probably about 35 photographers before they found one that would actually cover the show, which is, again, you're not letting me use these or show them off anywhere. I can't do anything with it. I have absolutely no rights to the image. Well, then why the hell would I want to come and show, waste
Right.
my time,
Right.
an hour and a half at your show?
Well, that ties into
So,
potential contracts that you might be signing off on if you're hired, if you're like hired to do the thing. Then there's those different
right.
levels when working with bands that like sometimes it's like, I grew up I grew up as a musician. My dad was a musician. I was friends with musicians. So a lot of the shows that I shot were like friends of friends. I'd be like, hey, we're doing this show. We'll be on the list. Could you come and take a few photos? Like I did a lot of that. Um,
Yeah.
and to me, that was enjoyable just because it was someone that I knew and I love their music. And I also got to photograph it. And occasionally there would be some cool opportunities that arose out of that. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those that's a little bit more challenging, probably one of the most challenging ones to really, make a steady income
Yeah.
from.
Yeah. And then just to that point, there are clubs that are some of the best kind of hidden gems in the world. On the East Coast, down in Jersey, there's a place called the Stone Pony. And there are nights that you'll end up in the club and you'll be told it's in or out. And if you decide to leave by 9:15, you're not coming back in till after midnight, and you'll kind of scratch your head and wonder why. But it could be uh, Bon Jovi has showed up to test out some new material. Bruce Springsteen has showed up to do stuff. I mean, there's a dozen different musicians that live on the East Coast that
Right.
have come in, and they love that crowd, and it's a great venue to test out something small and personal. And they'll tell you that you're allowed to take a few images, but you can't release the images until a certain point.
Right.
So but yeah, I've had that happen where it's like, this is one of those times where I wish I had a camera.
Yeah, there was one that I did here. Gosh, this was years ago. And this friend of mine called me up and he was like, hey, we're opening up for this band tonight and our photographer bailed on us. Can you come and shoot? And I was like, sure. And he told me who it was. I'm not going to mention it here. Uh, but I was like, no way. So it ended up being really cool because I got to shoot them and see, honestly, one of my favorite musicians of the past decade live. So
Yeah.
that was pretty cool. So, all right. I got a couple more questions here. I'm going to ask one of them, and then we're going to wrap this up, I think. So, are you ever shooting any video on these kinds of performances or anything like that?
Very rarely.
Okay.
Um, a lot of times they'll have somebody else doing video, so you don't want to
Right.
impede upon what the other person is doing or what they've got going on. But trying to shoot video and stills are two very different worlds. And if you really want to do a good job, stick to one genre or the other.
Okay.
And that would be my recommendation
Right.
because and then there are some places where they will not let you do video if you're shooting stills because that's what your credential is for.
Mm,
There are venues that I've gone to where you actually get a press credential,
right.
and there's some markings on there, and if the security guys or whoever's stagehands or whatever see that you're doing something that you're not credentialed for, it's a good way to get tossed out of a club and not invited back.
Don't do that. Do the thing
Yeah,
you were
that
brought
would.
in to do and be really good at it. Um,
Yeah.
so someone was asking also about, you mentioned the color checker passport at the beginning. So I just want to mention
Yes.
that again. One of the folks had asked about it again. So it's color checker passport is just this little device, and you just take a photo of it at the beginning of whatever shoot you're doing, whether you're in a club or doing a portrait shoot or whatever. And then you can pull that into Lightroom and use that as a tool to very quickly calibrate your color to get the color tones more even.
Yes.
So if things are a little bit crazy. So if you guys have questions, deeper questions about the color checker passport, please feel free to give us a call or come into the store and we can help you with that and show you what it looks like and all that good stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. Color management is actually kind of a fun thing. It will give you credence to do crazy things and have strange adult beverages in the middle of the night. Um, and I remember the days in the early days when you tried to calibrate a computer if you're working on a PC, and a lot of people don't realize this is that the reason that better systems that the lookup table as it's called is actually in the monitor, not in the computer, because Microsoft has an embedded color profile in their boards and their chipsets. So even if you do a calibration, your PC will revert back to the really crappy Microsoft color.
oh,
Um, and I work for X-Rite, and I was actually talking to one of the engineers, and it was doing it to me on a brand new product, and I'm like, okay, Wolfie, explain this to me. And he goes, oh, you're on a PC, aren't you? I'm like, how'd you know? He goes, and that's when he explained that to me. He goes, this is why you get a good monitor that has a built-in um, video card, basically, to the monitor. So you can calibrate the monitor and then plug it into any computer and get the same color regardless of where you're working. So if you are a color management Nazi, um, that's something to think about as well. Having a better like an NEC or an ISO or something like that. There are other brands, but those are two of the more well-known names for color management when it comes to monitors.
mm. All right. Well, Mark and Aaron hanging out. I want to thank you guys so much, and to all of you guys who tuned in and asked questions and participated in this live session. We appreciate all of your time so much. I'm glad we got to do a new topic. We haven't done this topic since I've been running events here, and it's definitely one that has been requested over the past couple of years. So, Mark, thanks for all the great information and inspiration. Hopefully soon we'll be able to figure out how we can do things like photograph rock shows again and be safe.
That would be nice.
There's a lot going on in that industry right now, and not just rock photography, but performance in general. One of the things I have photographed over the past few years is dance performances, and there's just we can't do that in the way obviously we once did. So hopefully, all of this information will serve as inspiration when we're able to photograph arts in general down the line. So thank you all so much. Come up on Tuesday, we're going to have another session with Canon, but check out our upcoming events, both in store and online at glazerscamera.com/workshops and events. So check it out. We look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Everyone have a great afternoon and enjoy your day. Thank you so much.